Stoic wisdom to heal. Emotional pain, rejection, guilt, and loneliness. Have you ever felt like time passed, but the pain stayed? You've rationalized it. You've tried to let go. You've told yourself, I'm over it. But then a small gesture, a quiet absence, or a sudden memory brings everything back. The same wounds, the same sadness, the same tightness in your chest you thought had already healed. Many people carry wounds they don't talk about, deep emotional scars left by rejection, betrayal, guilt, or abandonment. Wounds that don't just fade with time. Wounds that shaped how you see yourself, how you trust, how you love, and how you fear. You survive, yes. But surviving isn't the same as healing. Stoic philosophy doesn't ask you to suppress your emotions. It teaches you how to work with them. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." But what if the pain doesn't feel like a thought? What if it feels like a truth written into your bones? This video is a call to go deeper, to face what still hurts. Because only by turning toward our emotional pain, with honesty, courage, and clarity, can we truly begin to heal. In this episode, you'll learn why some wounds never fully close on their own, how Stoic philosophy helps you heal emotional pain at the root, how to reclaim self-trust after betrayal and trauma, how to stop carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you, and how to transform rejection, loneliness, and shame into wisdom and emotional strength. This is not about pretending everything is fine. This is about reclaiming your life, not by erasing the past, but by freeing yourself from what it still makes you feel. Because sometimes what keeps you stuck isn't the past itself, but how deeply it still lives inside you. Part 1. The pain time doesn't heal when the past still lives inside you. There's a common myth when it comes to emotional wounds, the idea that time heals everything. But time, without awareness, doesn't heal. It buries, it delays, it silences, and anything that's only silenced eventually comes back. Sometimes louder, sometimes more confusing, sometimes harder to understand. How many times have you thought, I should be over this by now? Or, why does this still hurt after so long? The truth is both painful and liberating. It still hurts because it was never healed, only repressed. And as Stoicism teaches us, what we avoid continues to control us. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." But those views, those interpretations, aren't always conscious. Many are shaped during childhood, in moments of rejection, humiliation, or neglect that taught you silently that being who you are wasn't enough. And you carry those conclusions into adulthood, trying to function normally with a soul full of fragments. You might be emotionally stuck in something your rational mind already understands. You may know it wasn't your fault, but still feel guilty. You may understand that person couldn't give you what you needed, but still long for their affection. That's not weakness, that's humanity. And more than that, it's a signal. It's time to face what's unfinished. Stoicism isn't about denying emotions, it's about understanding them, using them as a compass. Pain, especially the kind that lingers, is a signal, a request for presence. And when you respond to that call with clarity and courage, something shifts. You begin to recover pieces of yourself that were left behind. This isn't about erasing the past. It's about no longer being held hostage by it. And that process begins the moment you ask yourself, with honesty, what still hurts? What memories still paralyze you? What words still echo in your mind, even in silence? That's your starting point. That's where healing begins. Part 2. Rejection. The invisible wound that shapes who you think you are. Rejection isn't just being pushed aside. It's not just someone walking away. Rejection, especially when it happens early in life or during emotionally vulnerable moments, becomes a mirror, a distorted one. It doesn't just hurt in the moment, it silently shapes how you see yourself. That's what makes rejection so dangerous. It rewrites your internal narrative. You stop seeing it as someone else's inability to love you. and start believing that maybe you just weren't worthy of love at all. Many adults carry a wound they can't name. It may have started in childhood, a glance of disapproval, a long silence from a parent, constant comparisons to others, small actions with enormous impact. And those moments plant a seed that you must earn love, that your value is conditional, that who you are is never quite enough. As a result, you might grow up always trying to prove yourself, to be perfect, to over-deliver, or in contrast to avoid deep connections altogether, because trusting others now feels too risky. And this silent operating system continues in the background of your relationships, your decisions, your emotional life. Stoic philosophy teaches us that external things, like the approval or disapproval of others, don't define our worth. But when you've been wounded by rejection, that separation between what's external and what's internal becomes blurry, especially when the wound wasn't just an event, it became part of your identity. Seneca said, "Value yourself, and others will value you too." But how can you value yourself when the foundation of your self-worth was built on pain? The first step is to stop looking outside for what needs to be rebuilt inside. No amount of validation can substitute for real self-recognition, and no one else can give you back what you haven't yet given to yourself. The wound of rejection doesn't heal through avoidance. It heals through awareness, through presence, through separating the event from the identity. You were rejected. Yes, but that doesn't mean you were unworthy. Stoicism invites you to make that distinction, over and over until it's real. The people who failed to see your value don't get to define your story. You do. Part 3. The guilt that doesn't go away when you become your own judge. Not all emotional pain comes from what others did to you. Some of the most paralyzing wounds come from what you believe you did, or failed to do. And that's where guilt becomes a shadow. It follows you quietly, not as a loud accusation, but as a constant internal whisper. You should have known better. You should have stopped it. It's your fault. Guilt can masquerade as responsibility, but in reality, it's often distorted self-blame. It becomes a self-inflicted punishment, a trial that never ends, where you are the judge, the jury, and the prisoner. Have you ever felt guilty for trusting too much? For letting something go on for too long? For not seeing the red flags sooner? The guilt you carry might not even belong to you. It may be guilt from surviving, from leaving, from choosing yourself. But your mind turns it into a verdict, and you live under the sentence. Stoicism doesn't reject responsibility, but it draws a clear line between what's within your control and what isn't. Epictetus said, "If something is within your power, do it with excellence. If it is beyond your power, accept it with peace." Much of the guilt we carry is about things we couldn't control, or that we did the best we could with the awareness we had at the time. Guilt, when it becomes chronic, is not virtue. It's paralysis. And the Stoic path calls us not to punish ourselves, but to educate ourselves. Instead of asking, "Why did I do that?" ask, "What can I learn now?" This is how guilt transforms into wisdom, into responsibility without self-destruction. Seneca reminds us, "To err is human, but to persist in error is foolish." Yet punishing yourself forever is just another way of persisting in the past. You've already paid the price. The question now is, will you keep paying with your peace? You can't go back and change who you were, but you can choose who you become. And that choice begins the moment you stop holding yourself hostage for what you didn't know back then. Guilt is a signal, not a sentence. And the moment you listen with compassion instead of cruelty, you begin to set yourself free. Part 4. Loneliness. When even you are no longer with yourself. There's a kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. You can be surrounded by people, loved, invited, involved, and still feel like no one really sees you. Worse, like you can't even feel yourself anymore. This is the loneliness that hits in silence, when the noise fades, when the distractions end, and you realize you've lost touch with the person you once were. We're taught to avoid loneliness at all costs, to fill it, escape it, cover it with relationships, entertainment, work, constant motion. But loneliness, when met with presence instead of fear, becomes something else entirely: solitude. And this is where Stoic philosophy offers something rare and essential. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not for others but for himself, as a way to stay anchored in a world full of chaos. He understood that the most important connection you'll ever have is with your own mind. And yet, many of us have lost that connection long ago, abandoned ourselves trying to be loved, accepted, or needed by others. That's why the worst kind of loneliness isn't physical. It's internal. It's the loneliness of self-abandonment. You may have silenced your own needs to keep the peace. You may have become who others expected you to be, and forgotten how to be who you are. You may have stayed quiet for so long that your own voice now feels distant. Stoicism doesn't ask you to isolate yourself. It asks you to return to yourself, to become whole enough within that you no longer need others to complete you. Not because you don't value connection, but because your peace is no longer negotiable. To be with yourself without panic is power. To sit in stillness and not feel empty is freedom. To walk through loneliness and come out with self-respect instead of self-pity is growth. You are not truly alone when you're fully with yourself. And that reconnection, quiet, honest, steady, may be the deepest form of healing you'll ever experience. Part 5. Self-sabotage. When your mind becomes your greatest obstacle. Have you ever felt like just when things were starting to go well, you were the one who ruined it? You pulled away. You procrastinated. You picked a fight. You ghosted. It seemed random on the surface, but deep down, you knew. A part of you was scared to let it work. That's self-sabotage. Not because you want to fail, but because failure feels familiar. Pain feels safer than hope. Many people live under the rule of an inner voice that says, "You're not ready. You don't deserve this. If you get too close, you'll get hurt again." And so, without even realizing it, they destroy the very things they say they want. Not out of malice, but out of deep, unresolved pain. The Stoics teach that freedom begins with self-mastery. That your mind, left untrained, will repeat what is familiar, even if what's familiar is suffering. Epictetus said, "Don't be a slave to your impressions, control them instead." Self-sabotage isn't about weakness, it's about fear. Fear that history will repeat itself. Fear that you'll be abandoned again. Fear that this time when you give your best, it still won't be enough. So your mind steps in and creates protection. It distances you from opportunities, pushes away love, or pulls you back into familiar pain. Because pain you know feels safer than joy you don't trust. But Stoicism reminds us, we are not our emotions. We are not our past. We are the choices we make now, today, consciously. The antidote to self-sabotage is not force. It's clarity. It's catching the pattern in real time. It's learning to act not from fear but from principle. And above all, it's remembering, you're not the same person who was hurt. You've grown. You see more now. You're capable of responding differently. The question is no longer, will I be hurt again? The question is, will I stop hurting myself first? Self-sabotage is the mind's misguided attempt to keep you safe. But what you really need is to feel strong enough to stay where it's safe and no longer run when things are good. 6. Rebuilding self-trust. The way back to yourself. When someone betrays you, lies to you, or abandons you, it hurts. But when that pain turns inward, something deeper happens. You stop trusting yourself. You question your own judgment. You replay moments thinking, why didn't I see that coming? You begin to fear your own choices, and slowly you stop listening to your inner voice. Because the last time you followed it, it led you to pain. This is one of the most damaging consequences of emotional trauma. Not just what others did to you, but what you started to believe about yourself because of it. Stoicism teaches that our inner peace must be built on our own reason, not the instability of external events. But how can you trust your reasoning again, when it once seemed to lead you into the fire? The answer is not to reject your past, but to reframe it. You didn't fail. You acted with the awareness you had. You didn't choose wrong. You chose based on what you knew at the time. Now, with more experience, more clarity, and more strength, you can choose differently. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts are full of self-doubt, shame, or fear, your life reflects that. But if your thoughts begin to return to self-respect, inner discipline, and clarity, you begin to rebuild trust brick by brick. Self-trust is not a leap. It's a quiet process. It looks like saying no when you used to say yes just to be liked. It looks like not replying to the message you know will pull you back into chaos. It looks like making decisions that honor your values, not your wounds. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality, and often, the fear of repeating the past is more painful than anything that's actually happening." You are not broken. You are healing. And healing includes moments of doubt. But every time you listen to yourself and act from wisdom instead of fear, you restore a piece of what was lost. Trust isn't something others give you. It's something you rebuild within, quietly, steadily, intentionally. Part 7. Reframing the past. When pain becomes a teacher, not a prison. You can't change what happened. You can't unsay what was said or undo what was done. But there is something you can change, something that gives you back your power, the meaning you give to your past. This is the turning point. This is where pain stops being a life sentence and becomes a lesson. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Life is what our thoughts make it." It doesn't mean we pretend we were never hurt. It means we stop letting that hurt define who we are today. Because the past cannot hurt you now, unless you let its meaning live on, unchanged inside of you. You might still believe that you were abandoned because you weren't enough, that you were betrayed because you were too trusting, that you failed because you were weak. But what if none of that is true? What if your pain was not a punishment, but an awakening? What if it revealed the parts of you that needed care, protection, and truth? What if your darkest moments were also your initiation into a more grounded, self-aware, and resilient version of yourself? Stoic philosophy never glorifies suffering, but it redeems it by placing meaning where others only see misfortune. Seneca said, "It is in hardship that the soul is strengthened." The pain you survived may have broken your comfort, but it built your depth. Reframing is not pretending everything was meant to be. It's choosing not to carry the worst interpretation of your past. It's choosing to keep the wisdom and leave the wound. To say, "Yes, that happened, but I decide what it means now." You can either be the victim of what happened or the author of what comes next. And authors don't let pain write their stories. They use pain as ink, not chains. You are allowed to grow from what hurt you. You are allowed to rewrite the meaning. Not to forget, but to finally walk free. Part 8. Learning to love again. Conscious connection after the pain. Few things hurt more than being wounded by someone you trusted. When the people who were supposed to protect you are the ones who caused your deepest pain, it leaves a scar that goes beyond the relationship. It reshapes how you relate to love itself. After betrayal, abandonment, or emotional neglect, it's natural to build a shield. You start loving with caution. You scan for red flags. You hold back, not because you don't want love, but because you fear repeating the same heartbreak. And that fear starts to govern your relationships. You might enter new connections expecting the worst, or you might choose emotional safety over intimacy. You might even reject affection, just to avoid the risk of being vulnerable again. This is where Stoicism offers a path forward. It doesn't teach emotional detachment, it teaches emotional sovereignty. Epictetus said, "When someone shows you affection, receive it but don't let it possess you." Real love, through the lens of Stoic wisdom, is not about control, fear, or dependency. It's about two whole people walking side by side, not one losing themselves in the other. To love again, you don't need to forget the past. You need to stop letting it be the blueprint for every new experience. You are no longer the same version of yourself that was hurt. You have more tools, more discernment, more clarity. True healing doesn't make you colder, it makes you cleaner. You stop loving from desperation and start loving from fullness. You know where your boundaries are. You communicate clearly. You recognize red flags, and you act early. You no longer try to fix others at the cost of breaking yourself. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, look well into yourself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will look. That strength allows you to be soft without being weak. It allows you to open your heart without surrendering your self-respect. To love again, after pain, is an act of courage, but not reckless courage. It's the quiet courage of someone who knows, I can give without losing, I can stay without merging, I can walk away without shattering. Love becomes a choice, not a trap, and your peace remains yours, no matter who stays or goes. Part 9. Forgiving to free yourself. The Stoic release of what no longer serves you. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. People think it means saying what happened was okay, or pretending it didn't hurt, or letting someone back into your life who never took responsibility. But true forgiveness, especially through a Stoic lens, is not about others. It's about you. It's about releasing the emotional poison that's been silently weighing you down. Resentment is heavy. Anger, when held for too long, turns inward. You start replaying the same wounds. You keep them alive, even when the people who caused them have long moved on. Seneca said, the person who holds on to anger is the one who suffers most. And that's the truth. Resentment doesn't punish the person who hurt you. It punishes you. It takes your focus. It clouds your judgment. It anchors you to the pain. And worst of all, it keeps you emotionally tied to someone you no longer want to carry. Forgiveness in Stoicism is a rational act. It's not about reconciliation. It's not about saying you were right. It's about saying, you no longer get to occupy space in my mind, in my energy, or in my story. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the best revenge is to be unlike the one who caused the harm. That means your freedom doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from integrity. From choosing to move forward without dragging the chains of the past behind you. And there's one more person you might need to forgive. Yourself, for what you didn't know, for what you tolerated, for what you lost while trying to be loved. Self-forgiveness is the hardest kind because it requires both honesty and compassion. It's not denial. It's not excuses. It's the quiet realization that punishing yourself endlessly doesn't make you wiser. It just keeps you stuck. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering without rage. It's seeing the scar without reopening the wound. It's knowing, this happened. It hurt, but it no longer defines me. You're not excusing the harm. You're choosing to stop carrying it. That is freedom, and it belongs to you now. Part 10. Inner freedom. Your pain doesn't have to be the end of your story. Here you are. After rejection, guilt, abandonment, confusion, anger, silence, after doubting your worth, after carrying wounds that no one else saw, after surviving what you thought would break you. And now, you're not broken. You're healing. But healing isn't a final destination. It's a discipline. It's not a day when the pain magically disappears. It's waking up, again and again, and choosing not to be ruled by your past. Stoicism doesn't promise a life without suffering. It promises something better, the strength to not be enslaved by suffering. Marcus Aurelius wrote, what stands in the way becomes the way. The wound that hurt you can now guide you. The chaos that broke your confidence can now shape your clarity. You don't need to erase the past. You don't need to be free of scars. You simply need to decide, with conviction, this pain is no longer my identity. Your story is not about what happened. It's about what you choose to do now, with full awareness. To act from virtue, not emotion. To walk with calm, not chaos. To stop proving your worth to people who could never see it, and start living that worth from within. Seneca said, no man is free who is not master of himself. And self-mastery doesn't mean perfection. It means presence, discipline, honesty, courage. So here is your invitation to stop waiting for closure from people who will never give it, to stop apologizing for needing time to heal, to stop letting pain narrate your life. You have done the hardest part. You've faced the truth. Now, protect it, honor it, live from it, because the past may have shaped your wounds, but it doesn't get to shape your future. That power is yours now, and no one can take it from you again. Now that you understand that the most powerful prison is the one built inside your own mind, and that rebuilding your self-trust is a daily act of courage and awareness, a new and deeper question begins to rise. What if your wounds weren't just memories or words, but open scars that still ache? What if even with all your awareness, you still carry the weight of rejection, guilt, and loneliness? How do you heal what was left in pieces? How do you trust again when it was love that hurt you the most? In this episode, we went to the heart of emotional pain and saw how Stoic philosophy can help you heal the wounds time didn't heal. And more than that, how to transform that pain into wisdom, strength, and inner freedom. But your journey doesn't end here, because often, after you start healing, a new challenge appears. How do you protect your peace when the people around you still expect the old version of you, the broken one? How do you stay true to your evolution when others still try to guilt, manipulate, or pull you back? In the next video, we'll talk about how to deal with those who don't respect your healing, and how Stoicism can help you set firm emotional boundaries without guilt. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode in this Stoic healing series. And share in the comments, which part of this message spoke to your soul the most? Let's grow together with clarity, strength, and peace. Because your pain is not the end of your story, but how you rise from it. That's where your new chapter begins.